Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about a different way to think about volume. And this is the approach that I take with my own training these days. And it's by looking at the different experts and the amount of scientific research on strength, hypertrophy, everything else, and understanding it in the context of effective volume. Because everyone wants to talk about sets, right? X amount of sets. And I don't think the amount of sets that you do is particularly relevant the moment you step out of a single paradigm, like, oh, doing sets of 8 to 10 or whatever, right? Because sets has no real meaning other than doing a group of reps together with a break between them. But that isn't how we gauge volume. Volume should really be gauged in effective reps that have a training response. So what do we know as far as that goes based upon all the literature? Well, pretty much either something that is true compensatory acceleration with enough speed and enough weight to hit your upper threshold fibers, which most people are not necessarily training in the gym, or getting close to muscle failure. In other words, again, pretty good evidence for this, that the only reps that produce any hypertrophic effect, and conversely it's going to be most of your strength gains as well, are reps that take you within 5 reps of failure. So in other words, on a 10 rep set, only the last 5, if you hit failure, produced a training response. Right? That's the only volume that really benefited you in any way. The first 5 reps of a 10 rep set to failure didn't do anything. It's not till around rep 6 that we start getting a training response. Same thing for people who do these ultra high reps doing a 20 rep set. The first 14 or 15 didn't really have a training effect. So could we bring that back down and say that a 1 rep max, or even a single at 90% of your max, does that have an effect? Yeah, it's 1 rep. You have 1 rep where you hit upper threshold fibers. So in other words, to hit those fibers enough to count the same towards being a 10 rep set to failure or a 5 rep set to failure, you need to do 5 of them. But we can count that, can't we? We can count that as part of our training volume. Same thing, I'm doing compensatory acceleration speed singles on these deadlifts. I do 20 of them in a workout each time. It's 20 reps. Now it's 20 sets, but it's really only 20 effective reps. So when we go look at all the research, what do we have available? Well, most of the research shows us that 5 to 10 effective sets per week seems to produce maximum muscle growth in a given workout, right? Now we could extrapolate that up to frequency training, and I think we can, but you look at these various volume studies and they find that in a given workout, maximum growth is obtained somewhere between 5 to 10 quality limit sets. What does that really tell us? That tells us 25 to 50 effective reps, right? That's what it tells us. Because if those are limit sets and they're taken within 1 rep of failure or 2 failure, what do we have? 5 effective reps in each set. If we start seeing maximum muscle growth at 25 to 50, and when we go beyond that, we see diminished returns on the muscle growth. Not just diminished returns, but reduced muscle growth. It's not like each set isn't adding more, because beyond the 5th set, we get less growth per set, up to around 10. And some body parts and some individuals actually cut out before that. But we know that when you go to 15 or 20, in every study that's looked at it, you see less muscle growth over time. And the only volume studies that show muscle growth beyond that are the ones where they're just throwing in junk volume, tons of useless sets. Tons of useless sets. I think we can extrapolate that over to quality reps, and I don't think we're going to be far off the mark. Now, we could do the same thing when it comes to looking at the quality of it in terms of muscles. Most coaches and a lot of experts and researchers at this point count a lot of your big multi-joint movements as a primary and a secondary mover. In other words, let's take the bench press. Easy one to look at. Works the chest, the front delts, triceps. It puts less load on the triceps. Does it work them? Yes. But it's technically, we could count it as a half set. So couldn't we count it as half reps? So in other words, let's say we do 25 quality reps in a workout on a chest press like the bench press. What would that mean? 5 limit sets of some type? Or if we come up a rep shorter, if we get 4 reps per, we would need 6 of them to get 24. We would probably need 1 more set. We might need a 7th set to reach that threshold, or another exercise. But if we get to, any way you break it down, let's say we get to 25 quality reps. Well, that's only 12.5 for the triceps. We would need to add some extra tricep work to reach our effective volume, really our effective growth window. At that point, it would be prudent to add in a smaller tricep exercise. Now, we could argue a weighted dip hits both pretty evenly. It wouldn't have to do it in that case. But it has its own set of issues as a primary exercise. So you could look at that and say, okay, well, I probably need to do at least 3 sets for a tricep extension. And they're going to need to pretty much be to failure, or within 1 rep of, to get that 15, because we're still going to fall short. Because if we only do, if we take our 10 rep max and we do sets of 9, we're only getting 4 quality reps for 3, so it's only 12. We're falling a hair short. We want to be inside that window. We want to be inside that window, ideally. That should be your ideal training volumes. And notice I gave you a range. It's somewhere between 25 and 50, but you've got to get that 25 to get a good growth response. And so that would indicate to us why certain muscles, if we do X amount of sets, grow much slower than other ones in proportion. It's things like that. Same thing, we take a barbell row. Barbell row work the lats, mid traps, rear delts, everything is primary movers, right? Those are full reps for it. But maybe the biceps and brachialis and all of that, they get half reps. You would need a lot more volume to achieve that optimal growth window, wouldn't we? We could also extrapolate what I just said there over to Brad Schoenfeld's single joint versus multi-joint study, couldn't we? Because we came up short on his 1-arm dumbbell row over the biceps. It wasn't in the most effective growth range, and accordingly it got half the muscle growth that it should have. That data actually supports the hypothesis I just put forward. We're outside of that optimal growth window. And then we could carry this over to frequency as well. Again, when we start looking at it, most of the best and most elite athletes in the world, with some exceptions these days, with a strength-based focus, whether it's powerlifting, NFL, whatever, they tend to train upper lower 4 days a week. It works, and it puts us into, what do we know? Gives us 3 days to recover from the serious training. It lets us periodize. If you're training each muscle group twice a week on a 4-day rotation, it allows for pretty advanced periodization. It's very easy to program that because we can train 2 performance elements concurrently. And most of the data tend to suggest that going beyond around 2 times per week on a muscle, unless it increases volume, and lets us use as a volume increasing tool, almost no studies show us any significant muscle growth beyond twice a week. You tend to do better stacking the volume into those 2 workouts per week for the non-novice lifter. A lot of novices do really well on 3 days a week. We don't really see much in the way of additional growth beyond that unless it increases volume because our total volume for the week was too low. But we can do an enormous amount of volume hitting each muscle twice a week, can't we? That's an enormous amount, especially if we're hitting up near that 50 rep mark. You're talking about basically 10 limit sets twice a week. That's 20 work sets taken too close to failure or compensatory acceleration. That's a lot. You shouldn't need more than that. Like, who in the hell needs more than that? You really need more than 20 sets of squats or bench press in a week? Do you really think that you do? If you're actually pushing them hard, I don't think that you do. But we can come back over and count it as reps. So how do we fit our singles in? How do we count in our triples? Well, we look at the quality of reps. How close do we get to failure? Were they quality reps? A single's only going to count as 1. A 3-rep set that is with less than your 6-rep max is going to count as 3 reps towards that 25 to 50. And everything else is junk volume. In other words, a 10-rep set, the first 5, we don't count it because they don't do anything beneficial. There's no real benefit. It's the last 5. So we could count all of our volume up that way, hit each muscle group twice a week. Do any system of training you want, whether it's a conjugate like I'm doing or something else. That's going to be your ideal growth window for the majority of people. There's going to be exceptions. There's going to be things about maximum recoverable volume and different things, but you can rotate through that because your volume can be adjusted between that 25 and 50 because that's a pretty big range. But that is most likely going to be your ideal growth window and doing it around twice a week. So we wouldn't count it as sets. The only way you would say, oh, how many sets would be if you're doing a bunch of limit sets of over 5 reps or 5 reps or more. If that's not what you're doing, you're going to need to look at it in terms of the quality reps. And by that same token, if you're doing a 5x5, but you're leaving too many reps in reserve, you're still not hitting your 25, are you? They've got to be real close. They got to basically be with a weight you couldn't really get 6 with. And understanding that certain muscles only get half stimulus out of it. Hamstrings, for example. Hamstrings on a squat, that's not really that effective. It would count as half reps. It's a lesser stimulation to what your glutes and hips and quads and everything get. So you could basically break your body down this way and look at it in terms of the effective reps and whether that specific movement is a half rep or a full rep. You could make sure you do each thing twice a week and that each one of those is in that 25 to 50 effective rep range. And that's going to probably be pretty close for your volume. I'm not saying it's exact. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect in all cases, but I can assure you based upon the total sum of the data, it's going to get you real close to where you want to be. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.